Hey Bob, how are you?
How you doing?
Good. Okay, it's a couple of minutes past now, so I think we'll crack on with the webinar. Just to thank everybody who is attending. Obviously, we're going to be running more webinars into the future on different products. So Bob, obviously representing Eurotech. So KD Electronics are proud to be partners of Eurotech, and we actually have all the wireless gear that you're about to get demonstrated in stock, which is great. And it's only a short hop across from the UK where Eurotech stocked their large bulk orders of fire, so it's not too far away if required. Listen, enjoy the webinar. If you do have any queries or questions, Bob's going to open up the floor at the end of the webinar for any queries and questions. And again, if you need anything from us, we're always available in the Cork branch or the Dublin branch, or again on our website. So enjoy the webinar, and I hope you find it very useful. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Wyatt. I'm the technical manager at Eurotech Fire Systems, and we are also very proud to be associated with KD Electronics in Ireland. So today we're going to do a bit of an introduction into wireless fire detection in general, but specifically in terms of the Signify product, which is the new latest and newest design version of wireless system available on the market today. So as I say, it's called Signify, and we're just going to do a very quick technical overview on this product. So it is the newest, incredible, powerful and easy to configure EN54 Part 25 approved wireless system on the market today. So it's been 15 years in the making, and is based and designed and developed on the back of the very successful Argus and Hi-Fire static and dynamic systems. But a lot of the areas where this system fell down, the Signify picks up and runs, and is so much better in terms of signal strength, in terms of battery life, in terms of configuration. It really is like a giant step in terms of advancement in wireless fire detection. So if we move on, we're looking at just the system overview and a bit of the actual topology of the way it all goes together. So in terms of design, the wireless system is in compliance with BS 5839 Part 1 for commercial and industrial properties, and also BS 8629 systems. So 8629 is the stay put systems which have been introduced into the UK after the Grenfell fire 5 or 6 years ago. It complies with EN54 Part 25 for wireless systems. That's the industry standard. And it has an operating frequency at 868 megahertz, which is the wireless frequency band reserved for the industry. So in terms of the connectivity, it's actually referred to as a hybrid system. So it actually has seamless integration into Eurotech wired fire systems, and up to 240 devices on a hybrid loop. So basically you can mix and match both wired and wireless systems on the same intelligent control panel. It uses Argus Vega protocol, and has a maximum of 240 devices across both the wired and the wireless components on the actual loop itself. So it's actually an open protocol wireless system. So open protocol effectively means that the information on panels and detectors is available in the open market, rather than closed protocol, which generally are means that the detectors and the system and the panels and all components are manufactured by the same manufacturer, and they tend to keep the information very much secret and only work through associated and authorized installers as such. But we work in the open protocol market, and the protocol, as I suggested earlier, is Argus Vega. Typical applications for this Signify range of wireless devices are larger complex layouts and hotels, but really it's suitable for any commercial or heritage application, and particularly suitable for listed properties or heritage buildings. So the panels that you can see below are the compatible panels available at the moment. So we have you probably recognise the Kentech, the advanced, but the middle, or the black one, that's the Eurotech Takari panel, which is available in a multi-loop version, 1 to 9 loops, and a mini version, which is a single dedicated loop, but expandable into network capabilities. And the fourth panel you'll see is the Haze panel. So these are all intelligent control panels which are running Argus Vega protocol, which is the compatible protocol for the Signify wireless system. So we have a typical look at the loop wiring. So it's because we've got sort of more expansion in terms of the system. We can actually have up to 128 devices per mini system, which is effectively a translator, which can take 32 devices. But unlike the previous static version of system we used to supply, whenever you actually add a new expander, you can actually add another 32 devices. So potentially with a fully loaded translator and three fully loaded expanders, you would get up to your maximum of 128 devices from a single translator effectively. So each translator and each device, this is a field device, actually takes an intelligent loop address. But as with the old static system, expanders are currently invisible to the system. So they're a pure wireless device, but they don't actually take a loop address. So the panel doesn't see them, but the actual configuration, the Signex configuration program will of course see them and is used to program them. But we'll get onto that a bit later. So in terms of the channel topology, we've actually got many more pairs of actual channels that we actually can work with this Signify system. So in terms of the channels themselves, we've got dedicated network channels, which are the channels for communication between expanders and translators. And we've got 22 pairs of dedicated field channels, which are the transmission channels from the expander translators to the actual field devices. So in total, we've got 60 dedicated channels. Compare that to the 7 channels we would have on the previous wireless offerings. It makes for a sort of a great improvement, and basically it doesn't 100%, but it makes a huge difference in terms of alleviating sort of radio bleed or radio interference or frequency crossover on wireless systems, because we've got that range of dedicated field and network channels to actually choose from. One other thing on this new system is that we can actually have up to a maximum of 15 expanders per system. And so the expanders are basically used as signal boosters. But of course, every time you add an expander, you can add another potentially 32 devices, up to a maximum of 128 devices per translator. So it gives a lot more flexibility in terms of dealing with larger and more complicated systems with the increased number of expanders that we actually have available on this system. It also uses what's called safe path mesh technology. So it basically builds in redundancy communication paths between translators and expanders. So it will actually work on a mesh system, and in each case you've actually got dual channels. So even if you're talking to a translator to a single expander, so there's no redundancy there effectively because there's no other devices in the mesh, but you would still have the dual channels. So there is like an element of redundancy because it's actually working, communicating on with 2 channels of frequencies rather than a single channel. So that's that slide there shows the primary path and some of the redundancy paths between the expanders and the translator. So if any expander in the chain should fail, the transmission path finds an alternate route, ensuring communication continuity. So we have a very quick look at the actual loop wiring. So one of the big advantages is the improvement in aerial technology. So previously of our old offering, we used to have something like 150 meters in terms of open air transmission area between like a field device and a translator or an expander. But with this range, it's actually up to 1 kilometer, and it's the same for the translator to expander distances up to 1 kilometer. So this is vastly improved in terms of signal capability and signal strength, but it also reflects on the fact that when you actually have devices much closer, they're establishing an even stronger signal, which means they can use a lot less power in actually establishing the communication, which consequently means there's a far greater battery life of the actual devices. And we're saying on input devices, which are the detectors, which are the call points and the input monitors, we're actually saying up to 10-year battery life because of the improvement in aerial technology and the signal strengths that can be attained using this system. So the devices themselves, in the detection devices, we've got heat detectors, multi-sensors, opticals, and we have call points. So in the range at the moment, we don't actually have a weatherproof call point, but that will be coming. We do actually can supply the plastic covers, the IP65 weatherproof enclosures for call points, which are commercially available and certainly supplied by ourselves or through KD. In terms of alarm devices, we have sounder bases and we have sounder VAD bases. So this is an improvement on the last version that we had in the old range. In that range, we actually just had sounder beacons, which weren't Part 23 approved. So these wall-mounted and base-mounted sounder beacons are in fact VADs. So they can be used in a requirement for EN 54 Part 23. And of course, we've got the wall sounder and the wall sounder beacons. So we have input modules, we have output modules, and of course we have the translator and the Signify expander modules. Those of you who've actually seen the old style wireless that we used to supply or have supplied, you'll notice that the difference is that the aerials are actually now located within the IP65 enclosure. So it's a lot more security in terms of protecting the infrastructure of the fire detection system. And it is a genuine IP65 box, and so it can be used in an internal or an external application. So look at sort of hone down on some of the details in terms of the translator. So the translator itself is loop powered, just draws 20 milliamps. So that basically is the only loop loading that you'd actually have for a wireless system, is the actual the translator currents. So with a maximum of 6 translators per loop, you're only ever going to get up to 120 milliamps in terms of your loop loading. So there's never going to be any issues in terms of batteries or battery sizings or battery calculations. So it has a large full character LCD display, IP65 enclosure, and it has multiple connectivity options. So you can actually use a USB plug-in, taking the lid off, or you can actually connect via a Bluetooth dongle. Which is similar to that you'd actually use in the when doing the actual surveying, which we'll sort of look at a bit later. And on a single translator without any expanders, it's a maximum of 32 field devices without any expansion. So the expander looks the same as the translator in an IP65 enclosure. Again, with the old style, it does require a separate EN54 approved power supply. And the actual new expander can actually monitor both battery and mains faults on the power supply and give separate indication and verification of those fault conditions. And it's fully programmable from the translator as a large LCD character display screen. So Signify detector range, we've got the optical, we've got the thermal rate of rise, which can also be configured in the programming stage as a high temperature, something like a BS or a BR, multi-criteria optical detector, all with a 8 to 10 year battery life. As I say, this is due to the improvement in aerial technology and the improvement in the signal strengths that you can attain, or can be attained from these devices. So when used with the Signify translator, all detectors are individually controlled by the panel. So of course we're using a intelligent control panel here. So we can actually make use and benefit from the cause and effects features of the panels. So in real terms, and within my experience, probably 95% of all the cause and effects you can achieve on a wired system can be achieved using a wireless system as well. So you can add devices into input groups or cause and effects groups, and you can add outputs into or sounders and things into output groups to ensure that you get the correct operation of the actual fire system. But additionally, the sensors feature drift compensation and adjustable sensitivity. So the adjustable sensitivity is it's for the heat detector, whether it's actually a rate of rise or a fixed temperature device. And on the optical detector or the optical chamber in the multi-sensor as well, you have the drift compensation, which basically adjusts for dirty detectors, so it maintains the correct delta in terms of the analog value between what is deemed the normal condition and the fire condition. The core point, so it's pretty much standard, supplied with a flap under the requirements of BS 5839 and the 2017 revision. But it now uses two CR123A cells. So every component of this Signify system now actually uses CR123A cells. So there's no CR2032s. So it's not a case of stocking or carrying two sets of batteries on these systems. It's just the CR123As for all devices. So the audio-visual devices are fully intelligent, and the VADs or the sounder beacons, whether it's base-mounted or wall-mounted, Part 23 approved. 32 tone options. So, and also there's an option to actually have a select tone 0. And that will actually turn off the sounder element on the base-mounted sounder beacon, so you can actually just have a dedicated VAD rather than the sounder VAD. All with dual low-cost lithium batteries, our CR123s, up to 5-year battery life, and then a 2-month secondary. So the battery life on sounders is always a contention. And it really depends on a couple of factors. So the first factor is the frequency and the duration of the weekly fire test. And the second factor, of course, is the incidence of false alarms, which hopefully can be reduced as much as possible. But would say up to 5-year battery life, assuming that it's going to be a 10-second fire test on a weekly basis without any false alarms. And that's how we sort of get to that 5-year figure. So the wall-mounted sounders and sounder beacons are now available in red and white mouldings, and the wall-mounted versions are all IP65 as standard. And of course, they're fully monitored, as are all the components of a fire system of a wireless fire system for the primary and secondary power sources, the batteries, of course. So the wireless battery input and output modules. So you have a dedicated input or you had a dedicated output module. So it's not a case that you'd actually have an I/O as you might on some wired components. So the battery input module is designed for monitoring fire and fault contacts of third-party or ancillary equipment that needs to be integrated into the fire system. So the best example I can think of would possibly be an aspirating system or a beam detector, where these fire and fault contacts of those devices can be monitored. So they're IP65 rated, and they're available, as say, in a single input or a single output. So the output version actually is a has a set of voltage-free contacts, normally open and normally closed. So the input monitors inputs, and the output basically allows you to switch things on, switch things off. So that typically they're used for gas valve shutdowns, fire curtains, mag locks on emergency exits, etc. Magnetic door holders. Low voltage rated, but there is actually a mains rated add-on that you can piggyback over the back of the actual standard unit itself. So there's the option of switching mains, but normally it's just low voltage, 24 volts at up to 5 amps. So in summary of the system components, we have a maximum of 128 devices on a single translator or on one system. So that would mean 1 translator and up to 15 expanders. Okay, but so because you have the potential of up to 15 expanders, you have to take care not to exceed the maximum 128 devices connected to a single translator. So maximum 32 of any device per translators. Yeah, so this is another advantage of the Signify product. In the old style wireless systems we used to supply, you actually had a maximum of 16 outputs per translator. So you could have any number of inputs, but you would only be able to have 16 outputs. So you could have 20 inputs and 12 outputs, but you couldn't have 20 outputs and 12 inputs. But with this Signify product, you can actually there's no restriction on the number of outputs you can actually have on a single translator. So fully intelligent integration, as alluded to earlier, because we use the Argus Vega approved advanced Pentec or Takari or Hayes control panels, low cost lithium batteries, CR123s across the all ranges, battery life up to 10 years, 5 years output devices. And we also have what's called a wake up function. Now, this is a real improvement and a really nice feature of this product. So effectively, when you're programming the devices, when you're actually learning devices into the configuration program, you can actually just put them into what's called wake up mode. So we might be referring to this as in a different language. We might be calling it sleep mode, and then you wake them up. But effectively, they're sort of put into like a dormant state where they're actually programmed onto the system, programmed onto the translator. Their battery tabs have been pulled, or the battery is inserted into the other devices. So they're a live programmed device, but because they're in this wake up or dormant mode or sleep mode, call it what you want, they can just sit there without actually communicating. So they're literally waiting for a command from the translator to actually be woken up and start communicating. So this means that you can actually get your system designed, get your system programmed, and get them all installed without having to worry about the main infrastructure, i.e. the panel, or the loop cabling, or the network of panels being up and running. You can in one hit, in one day, get into all areas where you need to, mount the devices, mount the sounder bases and the detectors, or whatever the actual components are of the system, and then you can leave them, and they can be left there for a day, a week, a month, or a year, literally just in a dormant state, but programmed on, waiting for the translator to effectively wake them up, and then they'll start communicating as normal. So that's a really nice feature that we didn't see on the previous version of wireless systems. So we look at the wireless survey. So the wireless survey is the most important part of any wireless fire detection system. And in the UK now, the wireless survey result is actually a mandatory requirement of EN 54 Part 25, and now forms part of the commissioning document and the handover documentations in the UK. So as I say, it's so important to actually to conduct a survey. There's no rule of thumb in wireless systems. So I always say the rule of thumb in wireless systems is there's no rule of thumb. So basically that means you can't look at a survey, you can't look at a site, you can't look at an installation and think, okay, translator there, expander there should do the trick. It might well do, but there's always something that's going to that potentially could trip you up, which is why a survey is so important in terms of establishing the correct radio linkage and radio signal levels for the devices. So with Signify, it's much easier because you've got so much greater signal strength and distances that you can cover. But we'd still recommend using or doing a survey on every single installation. And the survey is very simple to do. We supply a survey kit, which is shown on the right here, and is designed to be used with an Android device, whether that's a phone or a tablet. And you can simply download from the Google Store the actual app, and its simplicity itself just to go through the actual different areas that you need to survey from. Effectively start off at the panel where the translator is going to be located. Then you would literally survey at all points and ensure you're still getting sort of good signals verified by the app and the survey kit. At a point where you start getting signal degradation and it's dropping off, at this point you'd actually add an expander into the system, resurvey from that point onwards, and carry on that procedure throughout the actual building, whether that's sort of horizontal or vertically throughout the building. Important to understand. Okay. So with the Signify, sorry about that. So with this Signify system, we've actually developed a very simple programming tool, and we've called it Signex. So this is the actual programming and configuration tool for the whole of the system. Just run on. So we actually say with the Signex system, the system program is made easy, and it's really it is very simple and very intuitive and almost fun to actually do a programming on the actual system itself. So it uses QR codes, and you actually scan the QR codes. So this is another real feature of the actual the Signify system itself, is that each device actually has a unique identifier in the form of a QR code. So in terms of the system design, you'd actually have a translator manual which has a provision for the insertion of the QR codes. So when you get the translator, you'd actually have the QR code on the box, QR code on a sticker, and the QR code on the same QR code on the translator itself on the PCB. So the idea is you'd actually scan into your Signex configuration software program, the actual translator, then you'd actually have like a hard copy of the QR code in the translator manual. So any devices you're adding, field devices, you then add in the same way to the Signify, the Signex software by scanning the QR code. You then have a hard copy of that QR code in the translator manual itself. And you'd follow that procedure through until you get to the area where you require an expander. So an expander will be scanned in, and then you'd use the manual for the expander in terms of locating the QR codes for the field devices that are actually installed onto the expander. So additionally, sorry, that's me. Additionally, you can drag and drop devices onto floor plans for simple setups. So within the features of the Signex software, you can import floor plans, whether in PDF or JPEG or PNG formats, into the actual program itself. So here you can then overlay and drag and drop the field devices into their actual locations. And some people actually even then use that to actually produce a zone chart or part of the commissioning documentation in terms of the as laid out installation and design, and even part of the BAFE approval for the BS 5839 Part 1 design. So once you've actually programmed or learnt all your devices and linked all your devices into the translator, you actually have what's called a config wizard button. So this is basically a program, the translator. So this will then pull all through all the actual information and data and actually program the translator. So once you've actually got it all programmed, you can actually go to a different area of the actual program, which is called status, and here you can actually see the live reporting of all the devices in terms of their signal levels. Here you can interrogate the event logs, and here you can generate site reports in PDF formats based upon the event log and the actual design and its configuration and operation. So here we actually see a typical layout of how a Signex system is actually put together. So essentially all these devices would have been scanned in using their QR codes and then appear on the left hand side, which is called the virtual warehouse. Then you literally just pull them and drag them into the actual site map area. So this is a site map which we just call like a spider web of type installation, or the way it's actually shown. So if we were so inclined, we could then drag a site map across or into that configuration and actually move and relocate all the devices to the individual areas where those devices are going to be located in real terms. So here we can see the translator on the left hand side, and here we can see 3 expanders, and we can see the links to the translator and the expanders, and we can see the links in the to the actual field devices. Interestingly, you will see that all the field devices and the translators are actually there with a green square. So at every stage of the programming, you actually get an icon, and the icon will basically tell you at what stage you're at in terms of the programming. So on the right hand side here, we've got the various icons you can actually see when programming a Signify system. So we have the network devices, which are basically the connection, or the translators and the expanders and the connections between them. So anytime you see a red triangle with just the outline, it means that you actually have an expander or a translator on the system, but it doesn't have a unique identifier. Therefore, it hasn't been scanned in, or it hasn't had its QR code number typed into the field under the edit system field. So once that procedure is completed or has been scanned in properly, you'd actually get that device with a solid red triangle. So the solid red triangle means that it still requires discovery, hasn't been programmed effectively, but it has its unique identifier. So then you have the coordinating device, no expander in warehouse panel virtual while updating. Okay, so similarly with the expanders, you'd have a yellow circle or a outline or a solid yellow circle. So this is just when the devices needs to be updated. Solid yellow, they have a unique identifier, so they've been scanned in properly. Without the yellow outline, that's without the unique identifier, so they need to have a QR code attributed to them, either have it been scanned in or to enter it manually. And finally, on the network devices, when you actually have a green square, it means that everything is programmed and it has a unique identifier. So that's the status that you should be seeing on these devices. And similarly with the actual child devices, which are the field devices, so any call point, sounder base, or detector is referred to as a child device, including the input and output modules. So when it's actually dragged across and it doesn't have a unique identifier, i.e. it hasn't been scanned in, because you'd normally scan in through your webcam, but if your webcam is not working, you can actually still add these devices in manually. So this is where you'd get the device come or appear in the virtual warehouse and be dragged across without the unique identifier. So at this point, you'd actually have to edit the properties of the device and read off and type in manually the actual the QR code associated number. But if your webcam was working and you scanned it in properly, it would appear with a solid inverted square. And then when you drag it across and you haven't linked it to a particular translator or a particular expander, you would actually have it as a red triangle, either solid or as an outline, depending on it's got its unique identifier. And once you actually assign it to something, whether that's a translator or an expander, then that would then require updating. So you get the yellow circle. And finally, once everything is completed and everything is programmed, then you would actually get the green square. So effectively, under your status on the site map for this Signify system using the Signex software, you'd actually be looking for all greens. And similarly, when you actually go to the status, which is in the top left-hand corner, you might just be able to make out the blue square. That's under the design segment, and below that you've got the status segment or the segment status map. So this would be where you can look at real-time data for the actual devices themselves. You can see the link quality of all the devices. So 9 times out of 10, you'll be seeing a 4, which is the maximum in terms of its signal strength. You can identify and interrogate each device if they're in a yellow condition, which would signify a fault condition. So it might be a tamper. It might be the fact that the battery cover has been left off one of the devices, for instance, which is a common feature I've seen, resulting in a tamper. Or it might be that one of the batteries hasn't been put in properly. Who knows? But you can actually interrogate each individual device in this status section. But once they're all green, effectively everything's programmed correctly, everything's communicating properly, and you have sort of good signal strengths and levels throughout the entire building. So everything then can be saved to either exported to a site file, and that can be saved. There's no need to save anything on the Signex program itself. There's also no requirement to actually do any, those of you familiar with the old style wireless systems from Argus and Hi-Fire, the configuration wasn't the actual the programming of the device. You'd actually have to effectively do a what was called a fire clone, which basically means that if the device was, or the expander or the translator, the old style, was damaged, then you would actually be able to re-import the program without having the requirement for programming all the devices back on. It would actually pull through the configuration, and you literally just have to replace the faulty device. Similarly, in this one, the configuration and is basically the fire clone itself. Replacing devices is very, very simple. You literally plug into the translator. You'd actually then hover over or click on the device that you need to replace. You'd actually select the replace device icon. You'd actually take the batteries out of the device that you'd actually be looking to replace. You'd enter the new unique QR code of the new device and then program, and then you would actually have that device, whether that's a sounder base, a detector, or an expander, even a translator, will then literally just slot back into the actual place without any issues at all. So in summary, it's very, very powerful, used for a whole range of systems, large and small, incorporates and encompasses the latest technology in terms of wireless communications. The range of these devices approximately 6 to 8 times better than anything else on the market, as we understand. And yeah, I think that's almost everything I can tell you about it at this stage. Of course, there's lots of other sort of more in-depth detail in terms of the programming itself and some of the quirks and setting up the expanders, etc., etc., etc. But whether that's done on a training webinar, or whether that's done sort of on site training ourselves or through KD, then but that's going to be for another day. So that's everything I have in terms for this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope you enjoyed it and it proved to be enlightening. So I think there's a requirement now where if you have any questions, we can see if we can answer those for you.
Paying attention. Unmute, not mute. Unmute.
Hello.
Hey Bob, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good. Listen, I'm just going to go down here, just unmute the lads and see if anybody's got any questions there. So.
Okay, folks.
If anyone has any questions, can you just unmute and then you can ask away?
Yeah, I think there's a question in the chat.
Okay. So there's a question there, Bob, about do you need software on your PC?
Yeah, yes, you do. So the software is available free of charge through yourselves or through us directly. It's called the Signex dedicated wireless configuration and programming software. It's the only slight quirk is that when you actually first run the installation wizard, you have to be plugged into a live translator. This is just like an extra level of security, such that then it will actually pull through all the required driver to actually run the installation wizard. So it just makes sure that sort of non-authorized or non-trained or non-proper fire engineers aren't working or don't have access to this configuration software. So it's just an added layer of security. So freely available, free of charge. Simple to install, but you have to be plugged into a translator to pull through the driver prior to installation. Is that okay?
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, Bob, I think everyone else is seeing if everything's okay. Yeah, Sean, I see your message there. Yeah, there's no problem. You can bring your laptop in here. We have a translator, so you can install the software in the KD office, either in Dublin or in Cork. There's no problem there. We'll help you set that up. Any other queries or questions before we leave the webinar? Huh? Okay, guys. Well, listen, thanks for your time today. We're going to be hosting some other webinars on other product ranges in the near future. So keep an eye on the website and we will send you again some information. So we have Suprema, GigaWave and Dewa coming up soon this side of Christmas, and then we'll be hosting some more in the new year. If you have any queries or questions, give us a shout. Cheers, Chris. Thanks, Chris. Perfect. See you later, Sean. Thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks, Bob, for hosting.
Okay, my pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Catch you
Thanks,
soon.
everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye. Bye.